I think a lot more grace needs to be given to teachers. I think right now the things that teachers are being expected to do rather than focusing on students' academic needs are just checking boxes and being little robots and being an assembly line. They're not able to be fully present. We just feel like by Friday, don't look at me, don't talk to me, don't touch me, don't need me. You know? The thing that I feel most compelled to share is that if things don't change, we will have no teachers.
The pandemic proved to be one of the biggest disasters ever for students, particularly those in public schools. Mark and Val's children were no exception, but instead of hindering their learning, it actually led to shocking but eye-opening truths and led to a new life for all of them.
When my son was in school, he was struggling, and towards the end of the pandemic, we were seeing that he was not doing well at all, and he was falling behind.
The pandemic happened, and they basically sent all the kids home with tablets. And in essence, we were basically homeschooling the kids ourselves. So you're sitting there watching what these teachers are doing, and the kids don't actually learn anything. Our daughter was not being challenged. Our son was way behind, and nobody seemed to be figuring out what to do.
The school system definitely wants a one-size-fits-all for all kids, and that's not how, every child is learning at their own pace. When we had to homeschool our kids, at first it was temporary, and then we thought, oh man, this is so awesome. We are seeing our kids thrive, and we are loving it. We're able to travel around America and see all these national monuments, go to museums, and it was just something that sparked our interest that we don't want to give this up, and we want to continue doing this.
You got some shocks in this situation. Nobody told you, for example, that your son was not reading to his grade level, right?
Correct.
How'd the light bulbs start coming on?
I would say during the pandemic, we really started to see what was happening. And our son was falling really behind. He wasn't reading, he wasn't writing well. And so that was truly eye-opening. We were sent home with tablets. As parents, we had to sit there and basically teach our kids ourselves. And we saw the downfalls of where our son was.
And what grade?
At that particular time?
Second grade.
And you say he was behind in math and reading both, right?
Yes. We knew he was a special kid, so...
He can't learn from memorization, can't sit behind a book, sit behind a screen. He's very, very hands-on, and that's what it seemed like he was never getting, and we only found out about that later on.
Did you find parents that didn't know where their kids were in terms of performance?
Absolutely. I think sometimes as teachers, we have those kids who we call bubble kiddos who aren't having gnarly behaviors in the classroom. They're not taking all of our attention. And it's sometimes hard to catch those kids because all of our attention is going to the kids who know nothing or a danger to others or themselves. So it's kids like your son who, as teachers, we feel like we're failing the most because our attention is going elsewhere.
There are 50 million kids in public school system. Think about this multiplied across so many millions of kids across the country. Do you think this is an emergency situation?
Absolutely.
Beyond measure, for sure.
30% of fourth graders, 30% of eighth graders cannot read at the most basic level. We're not even talking about math or science, we're just talking about reading. It's been said that in first, second, and third grade, you learn to read. From there on, you read to learn. So you spend the first 3 years learning, getting this tool, and then from there on, you use that tool to learn. So if you don't get it in those first 3 years, then you don't have that tool to gather knowledge with from that point on. And so you just start falling further behind and getting frustrated. And that's when they start acting out. That's why 85% of kids in the court system, in the juvenile centers, are barely literate. They got frustrated by the system, and so they pushed it away and started getting in trouble.
I mean, there were days I would get in my car and I was just glad everybody went home safe. Like it just shifted from genuinely teaching the students academics to feeling like you're putting out fires all day long, whether it's redirecting a behavior, whether it's a parent email that has absolutely nothing to do with academics. They're asking you unrealistic expectations.
How did it change self-esteem wise and pride wise once you started helping and doing what you did to fill that gap?
Well, at first, it was definitely a big challenge, and it does affect your self-esteem. After we found out what the issues were, we decided to, change a few things and use our resources at best. And it honestly made our kids feel so much more confident and freeing, and just it felt so nice for them to finally feel like they're on track.
And what do you call what you're doing?
We call it world schooling. It's like homeschooling, but instead we're actually going to these places. We try to cover the basics, math, reading, writing. Those are the things that we definitely want to make sure that they're challenged completely on. But when it comes to social studies, history, science, we travel to destinations. For almost 4 years now, we go to wherever we're supposed to read about. And internationally, we're going to really like hot button areas where you had in Hawaii, where you had Pearl Harbor, you had Japan, you had where the South Korean War happened. We're going to these different areas to actually explore and learn about them.
Do you have any idea what that's costing a year?
Probably an arm and a leg.
It's worth it, though.
It's worth it.
Completely worth it.
Yeah, but not everybody can do that.
Correct.
That's what makes it hard. Okay, coming up, a former principal and current education consultant who says schools are being rewarded financially for graduating students, not for educating them. We're going to add him to the conversation next. If you're worried about IRS collection tactics, you don't have to face them alone. Tax Network USA is here to help. Tax Network USA is the nation's premier tax relief firm and has negotiated over $1 billion in tax relief for clients. Our services include penalty forgiveness, hardship programs where you might not have to repay anything until your tax debt expires, and offer in compromise solutions for lump sum settlements. Whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million, our experts are ready to assist you. Even if you're behind on taxes due to missing personal or business records, Tax Network USA can guide you through the process. Tax season is long over, and for the IRS, that means it's collection season. To schedule complimentary consultation, call 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Dr. Phil. Don't let the IRS's aggressive tactics control your life. Take charge of your financial future. Visit tnusa.com/Dr. Phil today. Justin was a middle school teacher and then a principal who saw firsthand how schools were being pressured by administrators to pass students who didn't even show up. Now, as an education consultant, he's tackling the system from a different angle and is working to make sure students leave with the skills they need.
I think the main challenges that we face in education is we have students who need a lot more support than they're getting because they're far below grade level, they don't have the reading skills or the math skills, and that makes it difficult to teach at grade level. If you're a fourth grade teacher and you have students who are reading at a kindergarten or a first grade level, you can't teach kindergarten reading skills and teach fourth grade standards. So I think we need a massive investment in intervention services for students who are well below grade level. Districts have tried to get more students to graduate despite not increasing the number of students who are actually doing the work that it takes to learn. Like, you get credit for not turning in your assignments. You pass even if you don't show up to school, all in the name of getting a graduation rate up without really changing anything. Something is up if chronically truant students are graduating. I find it frustrating that policies make it difficult for students to fail even when they don't engage with the material. When schools fudge graduation requirements, when they pass and graduate students who haven't been showing up at the expense of everyone who's earning a diploma, they are now suspect. They are now no longer believed when they present that diploma and say, I have the skills to do this job. And employers reasonably are skeptical that the diploma means anything because the school has systematically devalued it by issuing diplomas to students who weren't even there.
How is this happening?
I think it starts with accountability, that schools understandably are held accountable for certain outcomes. They're held accountable for student attendance, which they don't completely control. They're held accountable for test scores, which they have a bigger influence on, and they're held accountable for graduation rates. And I think that's where some of the fudging starts.
Okay, so having a kid in school and graduation rates, not what they actually learn. Okay, that's a problem. We're incentivizing the wrong outcome criteria, right?
Absolutely.
Somebody can be there, just check in the morning and go hang out in the hall, not necessarily learn anything, not do anything. But this clearly is not working. And you say grading and graduation rate pressures people to lower the standards so they can keep the numbers up to get their funding.
Absolutely.
We're paying for the wrong things.
Right. We want schools to achieve the outcome of getting all students to read. We want that student to graduate, but we don't want them to graduate without being able to read.
But 19% of graduates can't read. How do you graduate and you can't read?
It's a scandal. It's not acceptable. I think it happens early on. The gaps begin early in kindergarten, in first grade. And because learning builds on learning, those gaps never close. Kids don't get the support they need, teachers don't get the support they need, and the job of catching students up becomes greater and greater with every passing year.
But we're talking about billions of dollars here that are being spent to educate kids that aren't getting educated. I mean, look at the US results versus these developed countries. And we're down at number 36 in literacy. But yet we spend more money than these other countries. We supposedly have all this technology, but yet we're 36th in the world in terms of literacy. How is that possible? We're 7th out of 37 in science. We're 25th in mathematics. Computer information, we're 5th out of 14. We're way down the list.
We are. And here's the thing. We know how to teach all children to read. This is not some mystery. This was figured out a long time ago.
Do we?
We absolutely do. And we've seen new legislation around the science of reading to make sure that all schools are using evidence-based practices so that students don't slip through the cracks. But I think what a lot of it comes down to, Dr. Phil, is support. Teachers are being asked to do this all on their own. So if you have 20 students who are below grade level, you're expected to catch them up on your own. And there is just not time in the day. Teachers need help.
They would hand me a spiral-bound book and they would walk out of my classroom and then expect me to teach it the next day. I can't read from a book and engage a 6-year-old. I have to have fun with it, right? They just expect teachers to do it all. It's like running this rat race of trying to figure it out.
There are at least 10 states that across the board have just lowered the standards. You start with a 50, right? The lowest grade a kid can get is a 50, and a 50 is passing in a lot of these states. When y'all were in school, wasn't the lowest grade a 0?
0.
I know, because I had a lot of zeros.
I think we're lowering the standards on everything, right? Like academics, of course, but we don't even have standards for behaviors. Listen to the teacher, what does that even mean? We're truly not even able to teach anymore. We're just putting out fires.
Well, and you can't suspend a student because if they go home that day, you don't have that head count and it affects your funding. So if you suspend 10 students because they got in fights or they attacked a teacher, well, then that's 10 students they don't get funding for. So these hellions stay in school and it disrupts the others who might be trying to learn.